There was actually more to the New Yorkers for Responsible Lending, and I'm just going to acknowledge the rest of what they said. That was very important. Um, the second concern that they put in their public comment, the second recommendation was to expand the proposed regulations to address lenders and servicers' failure to notify homeowners of force-placed flood insurance and limit retroactive billing. That is a direct quote. Um, Another direct quote: require lenders and servicers to advance payment for flood insurance for all homeowners whose policies are canceled for non payment. Now, that's their recommendation. Number three, limit retroactive charge. Um, Quote, pressing need to require timely notice by lenders, servicers, and insurance tracking vendors, and for strict limits on retroactive billing. They discuss a policy whereby there were 15 days. They recommend 15 days within which to send the notice, and 60 days is the maximum time for retroactive billing. Number three, sufficiency of demonstration in timely premium refunds. This is the recommendation. Mortgage lenders, servicers, and force-placed insurers often make it difficult for homeowners to provide proof of insurance and delay refunds of unearned force-placed flood insurance premiums when homeowners are able to provide this proof. So then the fourth recommendation was for a private flood insurance and escrow of flood insurance premium. One, the insurer must be licensed. Two, the coverage must be at least as broad as coverage provided under the National Flood Insurance Program. And three, it must be a dual interest policy with notice of the cancellation provided to both the homeowner and lender. This was the public comment that the New Yorkers for Responsible Lending replied. So let me just say that these specific aspects of what they recommend were actually, I believe, part of one could consider to be a legacy of public comments responding to the same issues. And I actually believe that public comments I posted to the Federal Reserve under other public comment periods respond directly to what they say and have additional kinds of fortification that could be available for the recommendations they made, while also addressing how a failure to implement recommendations such as these allowed for an exacerbation of situations that would have been forestalled had something like this been applied. For instance, I'll start with the thing about the private flood insurance and escrow flood insurance premium. What I just discussed about the bonds or the refinancing for the federal flood insurance program, my understanding is the major concern I had during Hurricane Harvey when I was in Houston was that somebody was really, really hardcore. Let's say hardcore. They were really assessing the situation as part of speculation on what was identified as a municipally based private flood insurance program. And I believe, and part of my accusations in my legal filings and my attempts for redress elsewhere, I believe that what happened was there was actually an intentional effort to inflate and misrepresent the damage from Hurricane Harvey in order to put pressure on the situation of insolvency that was already, or pending insolvency, was already confronting FEMA, specifically the floodplain insurance program prior to Hurricane Harvey, with an understanding that they wanted to get data from the floodplain insurance program while it was still under the federal government, so that when it got privatized, they would have the metrics to work with and the calibration of those metrics and that data, so that then they could adjust and define their own concepts of what was an acceptable rate system for whatever they did with their private insurance coverage. So if somebody had addressed what they were talking about and worked with this group and with people aligned with this group to discuss the private flood insurance program and this idea of an escrow of the flood insurance premium in good faith, and without an effort to try to compel or coerce them or compel them to concede their forthright analyses into agreeing to cooperate with illicit activity, then a lot of what has happened in the last 3 years, specifically to the FEMA system and specifically involving the federal flood insurance program, would not have happened. And so things like that were reflected, as I had attempted, in numerous reports to the federal government, in legal filings to both the state of Texas, the federal district court, and also all the way up onto the to the Supreme Court of the United States, when I, was specifically discussing this pattern of racketeering activity, and was included in the reports that I sent when I attempted to contact the Department of Justice and sent them a package in February of 2018. But specifically for these under part two, where they talk about limit retroactive charges, I had two public comments that I posted to the Federal Reserve myself that I think actually would have been kind of like a continuation of what they posted in 2013. One of them had to do with the same day automated clearinghouse and real time swap data info, where I talk about the concept of accrual accounting and being able to appropriately characterize things at the time so they don't accrue in a form of mischaracterization that allows for risk weighting or risk leveraging that's untenable, especially when it is not appropriately grounded in an explicit process and may or may not be used in some sort of derivative, regardless of what the derivative's for. And then second, there was another public comment that I had done where I talk about other experiences that had happened with the real estate market. They published this, their public comment was from December 10th of 2013. Mine were from 2019. The situation here is that there's plenty of data and there's plenty of goodwill and there is plenty of already demonstrably invested political capital, both from individuals as well as organizations. We don't need to engage in illicit and covert processes within our own country under the auspices that there's some sort of debt that needs to be worked out. And if, there are other individuals that have been obligated to illegal debt and they are in possession of the means by which to address it, then they need to actually produce proof that that's the case, rather than being in a situation like we are now as a nation, where people that have leveraged manipulation of saying other people are responsible for debt that they weren't, while they were in the processes of defrauding people and being able to risk leverage it to their advantage and to the disadvantage of entire constituencies, are held to account. And whatever is the alleged justification for what has been happening in the last year specifically, but whatever it is that they've tried to set up for tomorrow, is so delegitimized that they're not able to even attempt it again. This is just one public comment out of hundreds, right, that are just available through the Federal Reserve site. There is a lot of wealth of public information we have. It should not just be allowed to be harvested by people that are trying to cover their asses for intentional defaults and trying to harvest us so that they can create some sort of package out of our lives while we're divested of it.